Good evening, everybody. Tonight is a regular meeting of the Allendale Land Use Board, at which formal action will be taken on the items listed in the agenda and upon any other matters which may properly come before the Land Use Board. The requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied through posting on the public bulletin board and in a municipal building and on the borough website and by publication in the Record on January 13th, 2025, with copies being sent to the Ridgewood News and the Herald News. Certain agenda items will be open to the public for comment and/or testimony. The board will advise the public when such matters are open for their comment and/or testimony. Before we start, if everybody would kindly join me to salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you for coming out tonight. I know we're getting into the summer months. Greatly appreciated. Linda, roll call, please.
Vice Chairwoman Bergen.
Here.
Board Member Wolzala.
Here.
Board Member Petrino.
Here.
Board Member Gugliaro.
Here.
Councilman Yakarino.
Here.
Board Member Dallo.
Here.
Chairman Sirico.
Here.
Mayor Wusinski is absent. Board Member Butler.
Here.
And alternate Conti is absent.
Good. You. And we have Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Kelly is here on Zoom.
And Kiki is with us here up at the dais. Okay. So, next on our agenda are the approval of the minutes. I think we can just take all four of these together unless there's changes. Approval of minutes from the April 21st, 2025 Land Use Board, the 23rd, 2025 Land Use, May 12th, and May 14th board meetings as well. I went through them. Linda, there were a couple, but everything else is fine. I don't know if anybody else had anything to add, change. Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion, please, for approval of all four meeting notes as lined up here on the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you.
Vice Chairwoman Bergen.
Yes.
Board Member Wolzala.
Yes.
Board Member Petrino.
Yes.
Board Member Gugliaro.
Yes.
Councilman Yakarino.
Yes.
Board Member Dallo.
Yes.
Chairman Sirico.
Yes.
Board Member Butler.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We are going to do the public hearings section of our agenda. Normally we'll do the resolutions, but we're going to do those after. So the first thing that we are going to hear tonight is the housing element fair share plan of the borough's master plan, a presentation by Ed Stankus, and formal action will be taken. The board, we've been spending a lot of time on this. Mr. Stankus, you spent a boatload of time. We appreciate all the work.
Thank you.
It's a very important document for the borough and for everything moving forward.
If I might, I'm Jeff Serenia, and I'm your affordable housing attorney. I'd like to just create some context before I turn it over to Ed to explain the plan.
Okay, counsel, thank you very much. Please do.
Okay. So my firm represents municipalities across the state on affordable housing, and we've represented Allendale for a short time. I've worked with Ed and the town on putting together this plan. The backdrop of this plan is last March, the legislature and the governor signed an amendment to the Fair Housing Act into law that created a procedure by which municipalities could obtain immunity and keep immunity. That procedure entailed committing to a number by January of 2025, adopting filing a declaratory judgment action within 48 hours of adopting a resolution committing to a number. And then there was a process whereby your number could be resolved. We did that. We agreed on a prospective need of 200. And then the deadline is June 30th. to file a housing element and fair share plan to address the number that you've agreed to. And so where we are in this process is we're in the process of preparing, Ed prepared a housing element and fair share plan to address your obligations. We need to file that within 48 hours of adoption, assuming you move forward and adopt. It then goes over to the borough that should endorse it. We would then file a resolution of endorsement that then opens up a 60-day objection period where anyone who is unhappy with what we've done can file objections. After 60 days, those objections, there's first an attempt to mediate them. If mediation fails, it then goes into litigation. That's the grand scheme. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ed, who can explain the plan that he prepared.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any questions from the board before we move forward? Okay, please, sir.
Good evening. Edward Snikes with the firm of Burgess Associates, 25 Westwood Avenue in Westwood, New Jersey. I probably should be sworn in before I give my testimony.
Yeah, Ed, for purposes of this hearing, I think that's a good approach. I see your right hand is raised. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
And I see you already stated your name for the record, Ed. You are the Borough of Allendale land use consultant in a professional capacity as a professional planner. You have other licensing as well, I know. You also serve as the land use board professional planner. Your licenses remain current and in good standing as of this date, I assume. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good evening, board members and the public. As Jeff had just introduced, there's been a real long procedure involved in this whole effort, including many rounds of affordable housing. And that's what I'll be referring to for the record is certain rounds of affordable housing. You obviously we're up to what's called right now a fourth round plan. And that's what the title of the document states. And the document's dated up to June 5th of 2025. It was on file on June 6th of 2025, and that was the 10-day requirement before this hearing. Including in that, we also sent copies to the Bergen County Planning Board and to the Office of Planning Advocacy, excuse me, it's always a mouthful, for the state, and that's required by the municipal land use law. The reason being is that this is actually going to become an element of your master plan, and that's why we're before this board as a planning board for the purposes of adopting this document as an element of the master plan. As Mr. Serenian pointed out, this will be submitted to the program at the state level for their review and confirmation of the plan before it's an actual official document. But for purposes of tonight, it'll be an official document as an action of this board for the purposes of your master plan. So what you'll see in the document, it addresses what's called prior round need, also a third round need, and as I just mentioned, we're in the fourth round. The prior round's really your first and second round. It took us from 1987 to 1999. The third round was from 1999 to 2025, actually 26 years. And this next fourth round will take us for the next 10 years from 2025 to 2035. The reason why it was 26 years in the third round is a very long conversation I won't get into tonight, but it was a series of delays due to the rules themselves being established, but then overturned and then reestablished, and then the courts got involved and so on and so forth. So that whole effort took about 26 years. But Allendale has a very long-standing history of participating in developing affordable housing. And it should be commended as such from the standpoint of how we've addressed a lot of the needs of affordable housing throughout the years, even though we have sought certain adjustments to our need. And I'll talk about those in a moment. But for the purposes of the overall record, what I'll be also referring to is a PowerPoint presentation that I put together in a series of slides that tried to encapsulate the overall need numbers as we go forward. So as I mentioned, we have a prior round need, which is the first and second round. It adds up to 137 units. And one thing I will be identifying is that we do have an errata sheet that we've handed out to the board, but I'll be mentioning what the changes are to the public and to the purposes of tonight's meeting. And the purpose for that sheet is really to correct two different items within the document, and it's permitted to do as long as we obviously identify it for tonight's discussion. But in the prior round discussion on page 2, we actually had table, I believe it's table number 2, that needed to be amended on page 2. That is identifies what the units that address the prior round need. They're correctly shown on this PowerPoint for the purposes of the public. And so what they do is they identify prior efforts that the borough had performed, including regional contribution agreements called RCAs, that we contributed funding from the borough to Ridgefield and to Jersey City, about 44 units. We have a series of developments called Allendale Brook Estates, Saddledale, Garden Homes, the Whitney Project, Allendale Senior Housing, Orchard Commons, and Crescent Commons. And all those add up to about 103, they do add up to 103 units of credit. And then we were able to take bonuses for certain projects. And bonuses are permitted by the rules to try to encourage certain types of development to be formulated in the community. They try to promote special needs housing. They also promote in the prior rounds rental housing in order for communities to develop those types of housing products within their community to help address needs of affordable housing that have been established on the statewide level. This number of 137 comes from these prior rounds, but also is a matter of calculation due to statistical models that have been developed, and I'll touch on those in a moment. And so that shows from the prior round standpoint, this PowerPoint slide shows how we've addressed the 137 units, but we actually have additional credits from those programs that we established that are actually able to be carried forward to additional needs for the next round. I've just advanced the slide to the third round, realistic development potential. And then under the realistic development potential, or RDP, that is a reference to an adjustment that we sought and were granted by the court to reduce our third round need, which was actually at 308 units. But that 308, we reviewed the overall what's called vacant land capacity of Allendale. And as Allendale residents will know, we have a lot of built out conditions. We're highly built out throughout the borough. And what you're able to do according to the rules is make adjustments in accordance with your vacant land adjustments. So we did, in fact, pursue that in the third round, and were granted that by the court, as well as through a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center. The date of that prior settlement agreement was September 15th of 2017. We then subsequently prepared a third round plan, not our office, but I'm speaking for Allendale itself, prepared a housing element and fair share plan for that third round, submitted it to the court, and received the judgment of compliance on June 27th of 2019. And in that plan were all these projects and how we addressed all the various needs. Although what we've done in the fourth round is to show and look back at these two rounds to show how we've addressed those needs. And in fact, we've shifted some credits around due to the way we felt were best represented to address all of the needs. And so these tables are relatively the same as the third round, but yet with slight adjustments. And what I'll identify now are the units that address the third round RDP. You have additional credits that were carried forward from Allendale Brook Associates or Allendale Brook Estates. Garden Homes Whitney Project also had some units of credit that we carried forward. There's a project called Former Farm that's completed that provided 2 credits. Crescent Commons also provided additional credits of 7. We had a project called The Vale, as everyone knows, that was previously referenced as 220 West Crescent Avenue. It provided 5 units of credit. There's actually 1 bonus credit or surplus credit that was achieved from that project. There was a development of 6 instead of 5 that previously planned for. Eastern Christian Home 1 and 2 both provide 5 bedrooms or 5 units of credit that we can also apply. So as you see, the total number of credits applied is 41 for the third round, but yet we're also able to apply 25% of certain, up to 25% of your RDP can be applied as bonus credits. So we're seeking and had applied 13 units of bonus credits. So 41 plus 13 equals your 54. And we actually had one additional unit that we gained, obviously, as I just talked about at the Vale. That would be then brought into what's called unmet need. When I talk about realistic development potential and vacant land adjustment, that number is a reduction based upon the vacant properties, but also a realistic development potential that's also applied to development projects that were being realized during the third round. And that totaled 44 units of that were required in the RDP. The remainder of the of the overall need that was assigned by the state, it was originally at 308 units, becomes what's called unmet need. And the unmet need is 254 as a result of the 54 being reduced from the 308. And so therefore, that was a number that is identified in the regulations. We do have to, and we did have to in the third round, propose certain programs to try to address some of the unmet need. You're not required to address all of your unmet need. You're only required to identify some effort to address that need. Most importantly, what we did was to identify 3 different overlay zones in that third round. So these all exist, these overlay zones exist and were in place. One is called the Ramsey Golf and Country Club overlay zone. That's in an area of the borough as well. Also, the Allendale Corporate Center overlay zone. And then the Church of the Guardian Angel also has an overlay zone on that property. All told, those 3 sites add to our overlay zone effort to address the unmet need. But in addition to that, we had some planned surpluses that were not planned for in the actual third round, but became additional units of credit. We had 220 West Crescent Avenue, as I mentioned, that's 1 excess credit. We also had additional senior development at Seaback Court. Those add additional 4 units of credit. Also, through the zoning board's work with the Park and Ivy application, there was 1 affordable unit out of the 5 units that were approved at that development, and it's currently under construction. So all told, with all these credits and potential credits of the overlay zone, you're approximately 30% of your unmet need is being addressed through all these various mechanisms. So it's been very effective, I think, in order to try to find ways to address the unmet need of the third round. And so that touches on the third round components. The next part of it is looking at the fourth round. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the fourth round is from 2025 to 2035. So it's really looking forward to the next 10 years. The state originally through the DCA and starting from the Fair Housing Act, as Mr. Serenian pointed out a moment ago, was amended recently, and the DCA now prepares a calculation for the distribution of need for the fourth round. And in that fourth round, there is 2 components to that fourth round. One component is the prospective need. As he mentioned, it's a 200 unit requirement that was realized through mediation. And then in addition to that, there's something called present need. That present need was calculated at DCA utilizing certain statistical models and statistical information that identified 59 units that needed rehabilitation within Allendale. I find that very interesting to know the condition of many of the homes in Allendale and the value of the homes. To have that many units actually be identified, when I know in other communities there were more in double digits instead of triple digits. So what we do have is a vehicle that was provided for in the second and third round that identifies what's called a windshield survey, or the ability to look around the municipality to see exactly if there is any homes or the number of homes that would be reviewed to identify how many units would be needing rehabilitation instead of just relying on a statistical model. We had your building official go out and do actually a visual survey of homes within the community. He reviewed a lot of the different neighborhoods and came up with 10 units that he felt from exterior surveys could be using additional rehabilitation efforts to try to rehabilitate those homes. And what is meant by rehabilitation is a critical system. And it might be someone on a fixed income that maybe lives in a home and maybe has been there for many years, but that they often have restricted income and may not be able to replace a roof or upgrade their electrical system or have plumbing issues associated with the home. And so in that, what we're trying to do is to identify the number of units that are more practical and more realistic for Allendale, and that is 10 units. And we are providing that survey in this document. It's actually part of the appendix, and we're going to be submitting that to the program, requesting that adjustment to 10 instead of 159. And so that is a process that we'll be going through to validate that information. We had previously tried to submit that to DCA, but the courts had told us that they will review it during this next step as we submit our document. So we are submitting that with this document and proposing 10. For the prospective need of 200 units that were assigned by the DCA looking forward to the next 10 years, we went back and did another thorough analysis of your vacant land within the community, and we did not find any additional vacant land that would assign additional vacant land RDP, 2-year RDP number from the third round. So that fourth round of 54 would essentially stay the same. The exception to that was that in the rules, they do ask you to look at any potential change circumstance and or new properties that might be willing to develop affordable housing. And in our process, as we went through things, my office did receive an inquiry regarding a certain property in the community. It's identified as the Savini Restaurant, and that Savini Restaurant property, which is located at, bear with me a second, I just want to get the actual address. It's located at 168 West Crescent Avenue, block 1005, lot 19. It's a 1.75 acre property, and it was a request to consider the redevelopment of that property. Whether or not that redevelopment was actually realistic at this time, it was sort of an inquiry that was sort of seeing what might be available for that property into the future. Currently, right now, it's single-family residentially zoned at that location. But what we chose to do in an effort of providing I guess, an abundance of caution as we go forward, because these plans will be reviewed and scrutinized by interested parties as we look at them. We sought to identify that property as a potential site that might, in the next 10 years, seek redevelopment of its property. And so instead of waiting for that redevelopment to occur and having some sort of inquiry occur in the future, it was decided that we should identify that site in this housing plan. By identifying that site, we are applying a certain density that we would normally apply to that property from a standpoint of establishing an RDP because of the potential of that site being redeveloped. And that density we looked at was 12 units to the acre, would realize approximately 20 units. With a 20% set aside, that would realize 4 units of affordable housing, potentially. Not to say that we're rezoning that site. We're just saying what if, and looking at what that impact might be to our housing element and fair share plan. And so for in an abundance of caution, we chose to apply a 4-unit RDP to our fourth round. And we also realized in applying that 4-unit RDP, we knew we were renovating an existing affordable unit at Allendale Brook Estates at 98 Elm Street. Sorry, I blanked on that for a moment. That property was in need of rehabilitation. And so we chose to identify that we would obtain that property. The municipality has the first right to obtain the property, and had gone through with Allendale Housing, Inc. to purchase the property. They are going to be rehabilitating the property into 2 bedrooms of special needs units. Those 2 special needs units provide you with 2 additional credits. Those 2 additional credits we can apply to the fourth round need. So of the 4 units of RDP, 2 of them are being addressed by the 2 units within that 1 unit at 98 Elm. And so those 2 units reduce our fourth round RDP of 4 down to 2. You are allowed to apply to up to 25% of your RDP as bonus credits. Bonus credits for 4 is 1. So what we did was to apply 1 unit of bonus credits from that special needs housing rehabilitation project to the 4 units of RDP. So that brings us to 3 units of credit to apply to the 4 units of RDP. In the 4th round rules, and it has been part of the rules for many cycles, is that they require 50% of your RDP to be units that provide family units. The special needs units do not qualify as family units. So our task at that point was to find how we could address the 50% requirement, or 2 of the overall 4 units of need. We chose to look at units that might be, their credits may be coming to term. There's usually a 30-year deed restriction on any affordable unit that would be potentially coming due in 30 years. Believe it or not, some developments at Allendale Brook Estates will be coming due within our next 10-year cycle. So with that, we have in those deed restrictions the ability to use our trust fund money to help pay for those units when they do come to market, so that we can keep them as affordable units and extend their controls for another 30 years. So through that program of using our trust fund monies, which we currently have funds in effect currently, we do expect more funds to come into that trust fund. But to use that program, to help pay for the units themselves when they do come to market, and to extend their controls for another 30 years. By doing so, we get 2 additional family units of credit in the 4th round. So that's our mechanism to address those 2 additional units of credit. So I just wanted to identify that for the board. That is how we would be addressing the total 4 units of credit within the 4th round, as well as 1 bonus credit, actually realizing 5 units credit in that round. As I lose my voice. Excuse me. Should have brought a bottle of water. Then the next part of it becomes, what is our unmet need? So with the 4 units of RDP being addressed, and out of the 200 units of prospective needed for the 4th round, and I apologize for all these rounds and unit numbers and everything else, but they're all provided for in this document if you need to follow along. But that remaining amount, as I mentioned in the 3rd round, is what's called unmet need. So you'd have 196 units of unmet need. Take 4 from the 200 equals 196. That 196 becomes new unmet need for the 4th round. We chose to, we currently have existing 3 overlay zones to address your unmet need. They could still be in effect. They are still in effect, but they could still be used towards the 4th round. But we chose not to just stay silent with regard to using those 3rd round mechanisms. We chose to instead consider where could be another area that we might consider as another overlay. If you remember, we touched on the Allendale Corporate Center overlay zone in the 3rd round. That actually overlays just 1 lot in that Borough Line Road area. What we would be proposing is to extend that same overlay zone to another lot, another 5 acres of area, in addition to the 9 acres that currently exist in that overlay zone, almost 10 acres. So in total, we would have almost 15 acres of land that could be developed for the Allendale overlay zone for additional affordable units, should those properties be redeveloped in the future. Now, what I mean by that is that they can continue, they can do improvements on the property, but that if they look to change the use, they would be looking at a use that could be applied for additional multifamily housing at that location. And we chose to identify the same density at 12 dwelling units to the acre with a 20% set aside. So that is also part of this plan, is the proposal to include that additional area in the same Allendale corporate overlay zone. And as part of this overall document and in the plans, we do also touch on some of the demographic information and the current snapshot in time. It's required by the statute, so that information is provided in the overall document. I won't go through that in detail, but most of that information is very similar to your recent land use plan that we updated. Also in this document, we went through and identified and provided for the courts how we went about reviewing the vacant land adjustment, and whether or not there was any changes to it, which we didn't find any changes to it. In fact, actually, we probably find reductions due to the current changes in the floodplain rules, but we didn't seek any adjustment to the third round requirements or third round settlement agreement. In addition to that, there's a bunch of reporting information that's provided in the document. And then lastly, on the last few pages is something called the spending plan. And that spending plan is a component of a housing element fair share plan. It's a required component, but it identifies how we may predict additional funds coming into your trust fund and how we would then look to spend that money going forward. What's a requirement is to say, okay, you have to show how you're going to zero out the funding in the next 10 years. Obviously, that's with a lot of guesswork and predicting what that money might be used for. But we did, in fact, identify in there that we would put funding towards the rehabilitation of 10 units. If you remember, we're seeking that adjustment of 10 units. So we put in there an adjustment, or excuse me, funding to address those 10 units. This spending plan is only a sort of ancillary component to this document for the purposes of the planning board. The governing body has the sole responsibility to adopt that document. So it's really for more informational purposes for the board. It's really for the governing body to adopt that document. So as they go through, as Mr. Serenian mentioned a moment ago, after this board acts on this plan, the governing body would have to endorse the plan to be sent to also to the program at the state level for them to review and consider this document. But that also in that governing body action, they would be looking to endorse the spending, or excuse me, adopt the spending plan for the purposes of their actions, because it is funding that is being appropriated from a trust fund. And your trust fund is a fund that's been collecting development fee revenue from various development types within the community at different levels for residential compared to commercial. And that funding gets earmarked into a specific fund. It's an interest-bearing account, and that funding then goes towards programs like a rehabilitation program. So what we would be looking to do is to hire a affordable housing specialist that would be hired to help administer that rehabilitation program. That specialist would be paid for by the trust fund through administrative expenditures, but also they would be looking to promote that program. We'd be putting it on the website, we'd be doing mailers, things of that nature. And if you can imagine being on a fixed income, maybe they're elderly or disabled, but they may have a situation that they need funding to help improve a property. That funding would be through a revolving loan program, a very low interest loan program, so that if in fact, through a 10-year cycle, they were able to repay that loan program, it goes back into the trust fund and becomes more money to be used for other programs within a municipality. In addition to that funding, also, if that unit is sold during that 10-year obligation, that money also then is required to be paid back as a result of that sale. So you'll see that it's not lost. It just comes back to the borough and it helps fund future programs. So I wanted to identify that for the record. And so with that, the last thing I'll touch on is the errata sheets. As I mentioned, page 2, table 2 is being changed. And then on page 42 of the document, there's a paragraph, the first paragraph on that page. It says, in addition to the above, the borough will keep in place all mechanisms in its round 3 housing element fair share plan designed to address 256 unmet needs. Should have been 254. So that's also another change that's been identified. So if this board finds that this document is appropriate and they look to approve it, I would ask that you would include this errata sheet in your approval considerations. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would turn it back to the board for any questions.
Thank you.
That's all. I'm sorry. I've been living this for the last 3 months. So that's it.
Yeah, I've been, I've looked through some of this already. I went through it. I'm been open for questions.
I know the board's been looking at this for a while.
Yeah, exactly. And, comments, changes. clarifications, anything, Frank?
And the obligation as it is right now is for the fourth round will not change. It's going to be fixed.
That number is currently fixed. There was actually a court action that fixed the number at 200 for the prospective need. It has not adjusted the number for the present need, which is that rehabilitation share that I mentioned. That would be a process that we're going to be submitting to the program for their review.
Those would be in addition.
They're not additional units. Think of them as current existing units that have to be rehabilitated, whether they're rental or owned units.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, there you've been quiet.
No,
Wait for it too, so,
Ed did a good thorough job of
absolutely,
explaining it.
yeah. Yeah. We've been through this a few times with you, so, yes, I mean, I'm confident in everything that's here, and I've reviewed the document.
Thank you.
Chairman, this is Jeff Serenian. You should have a resolution
Yep.
before you as well. If you're inclined to vote on it, that would be helpful to have adopted signed so we could submit it and demonstrate to the program that we've adopted this plan within 48 hours from when I file.
Jeff, they do. This is Larry Cali speaking. The board does have that document in front of them that you prepared. I reviewed it for consistency with Title 40 purposes.
Okay.
And my recommendation to the board is following any deliberation, a public question and comment, the board consider a motion. If that motion is to adopt the plan as presented to the board, that they contemporaneously consider approving the resolution that's before them for memorialization concurrently, so that we will have that signed and back in your hands so you can proceed forward on your route with the state moving ahead.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, just not to forget also the public.
Yes.
Yeah, before we deliberate it, it's got to go to public for questions of Mr. Snikes and then any public comment as well, Mr. Chairman, as we discussed.
No, you're absolutely right. Okay, again, any questions from the okay, seeing none, I now open up to the public for any comments on anything that you just heard relative to this plan, any questions relative to the fair share housing, et cetera, et cetera. More than welcome to come up and ask. Okay. Seeing none, I bring it back to the board. There's no discussion. Then I'm going to ask, Larry, keep me honest here, okay? Do I have to read this resolution, or can we just?
No, it's relatively perfunctory, Mr. Chairman, in the sense that it recites what's before the board by way of the documents and a presentation of Mr. Sykes tonight. And for purposes of conformance with the submission timelines of the state, that's why it's before the board for, like I said, contemporaneous consideration of memorialization with board deliberation and vote this evening.
All right. So could I have a motion to accept the sure this properly, the housing element fair share plan dated June 5th that was submitted for approval to the board, the master plan. So have a motion, please. Motion. Okay. That's my second up. You can do the motion, I'll do a second. Okay.
Who made the motion?
Mr. Butler?
Vice Chairwoman Bergen,
Yes.
Board Member Wolzala,
Yes.
Board Member Petrino,
Yes.
Board Member Guglielmo,
Yes.
Councilman Yakarino,
Larry, I'm permitted to vote on this, yes?
Yes, sir, you are, Tyler.
All right, Linda, yes?
thank you. Board Member Dallo,
Yes.
Chairman Sirico,
Yes.
Board Member Butler.
Yes. Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Larry, that encompasses all of this then, correct?
It does. That motion, just to be clear, was to adopt the plan before you as presented by Mr. Snikes this evening, as well as the contemporaneous resolution that's before the board for memorialization tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Along with the corrections that Ed Schneikes presented.
Right, that was on the record, so that's part of the record, Jeff.
That, yes,
Great.
thank you. Okay. All right, I just want to clear up, to make sure we have all of this done. This is.
Have a nice evening.
Yes, council, thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Well,
Thank you for the guidance.
thank you.
All right. Council, we're gonna move on, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, next on our agenda tonight is application file 2024-04. Allendale Rehabilitation and Healthcare, 85 Harrison Road in Allendale, Block 601, Lot 7. And the application is to construct an 8,541 square foot addition to a non-conforming assisted living and skilled nursing home. And just for the record, this has been carried from the public hearing of May 14th, 2025. So. Guys, if you guys need a few minutes. Absolutely. Okay.
Expansion. Right. Yes, it is. Yeah. Brown.
Then what we have, well, then what we have. And. So. Rather sitting. It's much more comfortable. No, to that building, absolutely, so, no, no. Okay, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Ruben, if you want to sit down here.
I will.
Okay.
Organizing myself.
No worries.
My notes
No
set
worries.
up and now I lost.
No worries.
Okay.
Go ahead. Okay. Good.
Yes.
Okay, council, we're ready to go, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Welcome
Hello.
back, you and everybody. I'm just gonna have one quick request. If you can just do like a thumbnail of where you got it. Thank you very much, sir. Okay.
We ended the last meeting, after I had completed my testimony. We had heard from the public. Board had begun their deliberations. An issue was raised with regard to the use of the ambulance service. After discussions with the board, it was agreed that representatives of the owners would be in discussions with representatives of the town. And we would come back once those discussions had reached a point where we felt we had information to provide the board. And I believe we are at this stage. And I have two witnesses here tonight to relay those discussions, of which I have not been involved at all. In addition to that, there were a number of changes to the plans that were discussed and agreed upon at various stages of the last meeting and previously, frankly, in which the chair asked that we present a revised plan to the board depicting those changes. They included the elimination of spaces on the northern side, the movement of the trash area into existing spaces on the south side, and making parallel spaces along the southern lot line, as well as a few other items. While the chair had suggested that Mr. Jeffers was not necessary to present those, I thought it would make the most sense that he do so. So I brought him here tonight. In addition to that, we have two others, Brian Hooton and Dina Napolitano, both representatives of the owners who will testify after Teal Jeffers finishes. I really don't intend to sum up again. I think I wasted a lot of time last time, so I don't intend to do that again. I think that everybody here has a pretty good understanding of how we got here. We've all been very attentive to both the testimony of the applicant as well as testimony of the members of the public. So really all we're trying to do here is just put us into a place where we are today, show you the plans that have been revised, and put it to a vote.
Okay. Great, thank you. Board members, I have no problem proceeding if there's any questions on what you just heard. Okay. Mr. Kelly, we're going to proceed, okay?
Very good. Mr. Rubin, who is your first witness? Is it a recall of Mr. Jeffers at this time, or are you going to be
Yes,
going?
yes, it's
Okay,
Mr.
okay.
Jeffers at this time.
Okay,
If I recall,
He's still under oath.
he's already been, and he's still under oath.
He's still under oath.
that's right. Mr. Jeffers, you remain under oath from your last appearance before this board, and I assume your license remains current and in good standing as of this date?
Yes.
Okay. If you're going to present anything to the board that is not on file with the board, your counsel will identify it, and Michael, we will mark it for the record. I don't have the benefit of
Yes,
my
sir.
last hearing notes in front of me at the moment, but Linda can assist with the exhibit identification and number that we're going to be up to shortly. If you plan on presenting something we don't have, okay?
I will say this, that this was submitted to the board several weeks ago.
Okay.
So, this is a set of exhibits that are dated May 2nd that were submitted to the board the first part of May with the anticipation of being presented to the board at the May meeting.
So, and if they're submitted and unmodified from the time of that submission, you don't have to mark them. We could just start referencing them for the record, and you can proceed into your testimony, Mr. Jeffers.
Okay, fair enough. Good evening, Teal Jeffers from Jeffers Engineering. At the last meeting that we were here for the board was, I believe, December of 24. It's been that long. And as Mr. Rubin mentioned, there were several modifications and changes that the board asked us to evaluate and to take a look at. They pertain to the northwestern parking area, the northwestern portion of the site, which is the entrance to the skilled nursing unit, as well as some changes to the employee parking, which is in the south central portion of the site. Again, I'm referring to the exhibits dated May 2nd, and I'm going to go into sheet 2.1, which is just an enlarged version. In the northwestern parking area, there was a request to look at the parking in on the northern property. There was currently 8 parking stalls there now, and then there were 4 parking spaces proposed in that area. The board asked us to take a look at what we could do with those lots or with those stalls. We actually are proposing to remove those spaces, remove the existing under these exhibits, remove the existing 8 stalls, remove the 4 proposed stalls, extend curbing across the opening for those parking spaces. That would reduce the parking in this area by 12 parking spaces. But the benefit would be that it would increase the landscape buffer along the northern property line that the residences to the north, by approximately 20 feet, extending the buffer that's currently around 8.5 feet to approximately 38.5 feet. In this area, we would propose to add additional buffer plantings consisting of evergreen trees, which I'll show here and have it. Pardon me for just a second, I'm having a hookup thing for you. I got it. Sorry about that. Referring to sheet C 1.0, in this area, you can see we're proposing we would add approximately 25 evergreen trees in the area that was previously proposed to be added parking and existing parking, and a substantial increase to the existing buffer that's in that area. Additionally, there was discussion with regard to the fencing along the western property, which is currently a 4-foot-high chain link fence. The board had asked us to look at replacing that with a 6-foot-high fence with privacy slats, brown specifically, where black and brown wasn't available. After we evaluated that, what we'd like to do and like to propose is to remove the 4-foot fence, relocate it to the property line where it's appropriate because it's well set into the property line, and replace that with either a 5-foot-high chain link fence, which is stipulated by section 270-31 of the ordinance, or if the board would prefer a 6-foot-high fence, as long as the board would consider granting us a deviation from that particular ordinance section, we'd be glad to put a 6-foot-high fence. But what we're proposing here is to take that fence, make it a privacy fence with the slats, move it to the property line. Again, under section 270-31, it would need to be a 5-foot-high fence, or with the board's approval, we could put that as a 6-foot-high fence. With that, the gate at Heritage Drive would also be replaced with the same type of fence, chain link with a privacy slats, which would accomplish several things. First, it would provide additional visual screen. It would eliminate pedestrian access. So we couldn't get, I know there were some complaints and some issues with Amazon deliveries parking in the cul-de-sac and walking. Because right now the gate is not a pedestrian block. It's a vehicular block. This scenario would create a pedestrian block as well as the vehicular block. It would have access control, but it would also provide that visual screen. So that would be a benefit and obviously an enhancement to that western property. With the changes for the parking in here, as I mentioned, we would reduce parking by 12 spaces with the elimination of the stalls here along the northern property. Additionally, there were some comments about employees, and if I'm correct, taking breaks along the northern property line. That was a complaint by the neighbors. In talking with the applicant and the facility, we're proposing to create a picnic area with tables here for the employees to have a dedicated outdoor space, which would be located essentially within the alcove of the building itself, giving them a designated area to go on breaks. That would include picnic tables, trash receptacles, cigarette receptacles, and so forth. Other area. The other changes pertains to the employee parking lot in the south central portion of the site. At the prior meetings and at the December meeting, we proposed or reflected the relocation of the trash from the southern property line to a center portion of the employee parking area, positioning that trash on a 45-degree angle. When we had proposed that in December, we maintained 90-degree parking spaces along the southern property line. And the board asked us to consider to evaluate removing them to increase buffer in this area. So in evaluating that, there was initially 6 90-degree We are proposing to eliminate them and put 2 parallel parking spaces in with some striping, one to maintain access to a fire hydrant, and then other striping just to define and create that space and traffic flow. This would enable us to shift that curve further into the site by approximately 8 feet and providing additional area here for additional evergreen plantings and screen plantings. This scenario will reduce the parking count at the in this area by 4. With these changes collectively, we are reducing, or we would reduce the overall parking from 170, which exists in the board may recall. We're seeking variance to maintain 170 parking spaces down to 154, a reduction of 16. As the board may recall, with the testimony of the traffic engineer, there was an evaluation and study of the facility, parking counts, and so forth. Mr. Scott Kennel had previously testified of a parking demand of 107 was reported, and then the maximum demand of approximately 120 would be anticipated based on their evaluation. Even with 154, we still have sufficient parking based on that traffic study and that traffic evaluation. So the last thing I just want to show is in that southern area, when we do move that curve, go to a parallel parking, we're able to position in approximately 21 evergreen trees. They're envisioned to be planted at 6 to 8 foot in height in a staggered configuration to provide light screen. So we do offer those changes in an effort to address some of the comments and the concerns that the board has made, as well as some of the concerns that we heard from the neighbors. We can offer that up if there's any questions or comments.
You also added an employee parking sign, employee-only parking sign as access to the southern parking lot, correct?
Yes, thank you. There was some question about how do we identify or designate that as employee, which was a good point. And after evaluating that, we're proposing to put here on the entrance of that area would be an employee parking only sign. So that any visitors who happen to come around and happen to come into this area know that that's where. So. Any other changes?
The whole garbage area, though, the layout is all still the same.
The layout of the trash is still the same. The modifications occurred here, where we initially had 90-degree parking nosing into the southern curve. This layout also demonstrates we have maneuverability for trash truck through this area, as well as a fire truck to be able to do a K-turn turnaround. We had presented that to the fire chief.
What is the gate configuration at the back going to look like now? I kind of lost track of where we are.
Here on the western side at the
Harrison Road.
Right now, that gate sits inside the property line, and it's if I recall correctly, a particular steel style gate that blocks the vehicular traffic. With this configuration, we would pick the fence up, move it over to the property line. 5 or, as I said, 6 foot high if the board would grant. And then that would be a matching gate, 6 foot high or 5 foot high with same coloration, same privacy slats located at the property. We would more than likely configure that as a sliding style gate to run down along the inside of the fence line. So it maintains a nice smooth alignment and then have access control when the gate opens.
Knox box would be there.
And Knox box as well.
So do you believe this will prevent people from making deliveries from that side of the building?
With that, it would be a permanent, or not, I should say a permanent barrier, but a complete barrier. Right now, there's not a barrier there for obstructing pedestrian to walk through. This would be a perimeter fence with a gate. And they would have to scale that fence in order to get there.
What would stop an Amazon truck or a DoorDash or an Uber that whatever it's called, Uber Eats, from stopping there and then handing the package over the top?
Very honestly,
Nothing. Right.
probably nothing. However, because certain things you can't control in a case like that. However, as was testified to in previous meetings, they've made advancements working with Apple Maps, Google Maps, and so forth. Because one of the biggest problems is when you typed in the address, it took you here.
Right.
And from what I understand, somebody please correct me, because
We'll have testimony to that.
but that's been changed to go to the Route 17 entrance. So hopefully that scenario where deliveries are occurring here gets reduced or minimized, because if they're using a mapping device, it should be coming to 17.
And is there, for the employees that were going into the Ramsey side where there was litter or loitering or whatever it is, I don't think we were able to put a barrier up there because there was a creek or there was water or something there. And I think there was discussion of putting up a gate or something across that perimeter so that people couldn't spill into Ramsey or spill into the creek back there with litter.
Well, along the rear of some of these lots, there is currently fencing, and I believe some of that fencing may be the residential fencing. But there is a stream that comes along the northern property line here. One of the comments or the discussions was they really had no place for employees to congregate on breaks, a dedicated place. So they were going up into this area. Providing now a designated area gives them a point or the destination to go to. The additional plantings in here will then take away some of this space to prevent them from having an open space to gather. We hadn't talked about putting a fence along this side, but more so really to increase the buffering in that area.
Okay. We're just trying to think of a way to, if people are looking to socially gather, perhaps they're looking to do it out of the center of the facility. So I would assume if that was their intention, they may still look to gather out of the center of the facility. So you're hoping that they go to this courtyard. But if the employees don't go to that courtyard, do they still have other places to hang out and loiter and party and litter?
I think
Yeah.
we'll deal with that, let the operations deal with that. That's an operations
Okay.
question.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Can I ask a question regarding the gate again? The sliding fence, how will emergency services have access to that? Will that be tied into the fire alarm? When the fire alarm goes off, the gate will open? And also, will there be an SOS box there like we talked about previously still?
Yes, whatever the fire department requires, we will cooperate.
How about for access for police department? There'll be,
A Knox
the SOS box will be
Yes.
installed? Like you said earlier, the Knox box will be out there as well, correct?
Yes. You were going to check on whether or not the fire department wanted the gate slatted or not, or whether they wanted to be able to see through it and into the site. Were you able to do
Well,
that?
I think if you do not slat the gate, I think you're defeating the purpose of having privacy.
But it would just be where the street is. The question is, we don't have a problem doing it. The question is, does the fire department have a problem not being able to see into the site when they pull up? Because
Only being a 5 or 6 foot, being a 5 or 6 foot fence, you can obviously still see.
okay, that's fine with me. That was something that you said you were going to check on, and I just am seeking to confirm whether that was done.
Michael, I think at the end of the day, it's the obligation of the applicant to satisfy any of the departments in the borough. So it's going to be, the onus is going to be on the applicant ultimately to confirm that with the fire official and make sure the implementation is done to the official satisfaction, subject to board professionals review, post-vote, should this move forward to a vote and be favorable. So
I understand that, but what I don't want is a condition that the fire department then rejects and leaves us hanging. That's what I'm concerned about. That's all. That we don't want to have to come back because the fire department says we don't want that condition imposed because it hinders us in some way.
If this moves
no,
forward.
there won't be. We'll make sure there's flexibility in there that it's going to be
That's all I ask.
on
Thank
the
you.
determination of the other officials.
I appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank
if this moves forward, we'll put that, as Council just said, the flexibility.
Great.
I have a question regarding the west side. So the fence
slide out to the property line. Is there any plantings proposed in that west side? I can't see from here. There's no plantings proposed, currently along that western side, other than maintaining with the existing vegetation. Initially, we had some additional shade trees along the edge of the parking lot here. What we show in red is proposed as an exhibit. What's shown in black as darker is what was initially proposed with the design plans, original application. So we do have some shade trees along the western side of the parking lot. Existing trees along the western boundary were to remain. We hadn't proposed any. There are some trees there. I remember. I know you're just north, south. I just was asking that question.
So by moving the fence, is there any trees that would have to be removed? If again, if this was to move forward, and you're proposing, if I'm understanding what you said, you're proposing to have the fence 5-6 feet, whatever it turns out to be, at the property line. When that's installed, are there trees that are not shown on the plans that may require removal?
I don't believe so. If there are trees on the property line, what we would probably do is localize that fence to go around that tree so that we weren't taking those trees down. Obviously, we see the benefit of those trees not making for our facility, but especially if they're a short specimen style tree.
Board members, any other questions of the witness on what you heard tonight or from this witness in the past? Okay. Council, I'm gonna open it to the public for this witness, okay, if that's okay with you. Larry, I'm gonna open up to the public.
Yes.
Okay. I'm opening up questioning of this witness on anything that you just heard in his testimony tonight. Come up and make comments. Hi, ma'am.
Hello.
Please, and your name, address.
Mary Van Belinda, 2 King Road, Allendale.
Thank you.
Since we can't see back there, can I see what the property line is for where you're gonna put the gate along the property? Because my whole backyard's trees. So I'm wondering if you're gonna be affecting all the trees that I have had to grow when you took down 15 trees in the lot behind. So I'm just curious, I can't see from here.
The western property line here along lot 1, block 603 lot 1, and then lot 1 here on the north side. That fence would be moved out to that property.
So is it going out to where the cul-de-sac starts? Like where, when you say out, what does that mean?
Currently, the fence sits roughly 17 to 24 feet inside of the property.
Okay.
Under this proposal, that fence would just simply be moved out to the property line itself. Wouldn't extend over the property, but it would be moved out to, typically it's installed within that 0 to 1 foot from the property. At the tip of the cul-de-sac, correct? That property line comes in, approximately at the tip of the
So right
cul-de-sac.
at the curve of the cul-de-sac? Or are we talking about further in? Because then the 2 fences for the property next to me are level. So how we gonna, just that?
Franco.
Just for clarification, if it goes to the curve, would you be required, Michael, I don't know.
I would
be
keep it
required to keep it
straight
within 10 feet of a proposed, right of
right away.
Because if you bring it right to the curb, you would be encroaching on the right of way, which is approximately 10 feet behind the curb. It would not encroach within, as I understand, the right of way does not come around the cul-de-sac on this end, it terminates at our property. So the fence would not extend within the right of way, it would extend up to the property line. My understanding is that the right of way terminates at our property. That's what the survey shows. That's what the survey shows, correct? But your point taken is, it's deceiving.
Yeah.
Why would it be coming up close to the curb, but the curb comes around that cul-de-sac and then comes into the site itself? I'm just, so again, thinking in the terms of living in the north, when a truck goes in there to snow plow that cul-de-sac, if your fence is right along the curb, it's gonna blow out the fence every time.
Mm-hmm.
That's, again, partly because the nature of those cul-de-sacs is to
clear them out to the curb. And if the fence sits at the backside of the curb, you're not gonna leave any room.
If it's the board's preference, that gate fence could be offset in the area of the cul-de-sac, set back in slightly.
Like,
yeah.
right away there of any sort. So
Yeah, this one I have to push to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the information on the survey and it shows the, the bulb of the cul-de-sac,
That curb goes right
off
up to
their
the property.
property and the curb line, right there.
Why are you moving the fence line to begin with? Out of curiosity.
The fence line, like I said, currently sits significantly
Okay.
into the property line. The thought was there is to move it back out to the property line and then also to enable us to better fence the outside thing.
So what if the fence was to remain where it is? And
I think that there's an issue that we need to fence to assert our rights.
I just find it, again, you're not to disagree, I just find it hard to believe that when that subdivision was done or when that street was made into a cul-de-sac, there was no agreement where, I mean, there's zero, almost like a zero measurement to the backside of the curve to that property line.
We'll set the gate in.
I'm just, again, just,
I think that makes sense to do that, to set it in 5 or 7 feet.
you know what I mean? Like, it's
It's
just one
like,
of those.
absolutely, in light of that, what we could do is move that gate fence in. Let's say where my tent is, and from the end of my tent, within 90-degree out to the property line. So that we have that offset around that pole of the cul-de-sac. I have no objection to that, that's something we could add, absolutely, for an engineer.
Actually, it could be the field decision based upon the trees and consideration of the, maybe an easement or, just setting it back a little bit. So maybe something that gets done with the engineer in the field.
Absolutely. I think that's a good suggestion.
thank you, ma'am. Michael, I'm gonna, I'm gonna ask for your thoughts on this one. If you have anything else to add to that?
With regard to the fence, I mean, I think, Frank brings up a good point that you don't want to have that fence too close to the curb line because in the wintertime, it's just going to be a problem for maintaining and clearing snow, for both the borough and the owner of the property. So I think the reality is going to be, should this be approved, I think it's going to end up getting laid out in the field some distance off the property line. It'll be dependent on, I think, based on the obstructions that we see out there.
So you'd be willing to work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it should be probably at the gate.
At that particular point.
At the entrance, at the cul-de-sac. Absolutely. I think we've even talked about that once or twice. Yes.
All right. Anybody else from the public have a comment on what you said or a question? Okay. Seeing none, I bring it back to the board. Mr. Stankus.
The only question I had was, will any of the parking changes change the lighting that's proposed?
I don't believe so, in that particular case. Okay. If for some reason we need to modify a light to accommodate that, that's something we'll work with you and board engineer to make sure that you're comfortable with that adjustment. But, from what I see, we shouldn't need to.
Thank you. Remember, the entire lighting plan is subject to a field test, post-construction, the adjustments to be made, and determination as to which can be dimmed at night and so forth. safety, how much safety lighting is necessary, so forth like that. And that's all gonna be worked out with your
As
professionals.
Of course.
Yeah, that should help. What I was after is if there's any modifications that they don't affect the residents.
Okay. And that's our standard way of doing things. Right. Okay, and then any other comment? That was it. Thank you, sir. Michael again. That's our
I don't have
otherwise.
anything ready at the moment.
We're gonna move up, yeah.
Yeah, I think questions may come up from your operation. That's
Okay, fair enough. All right, once again, board members, any further questions for Mr. Jackson?
So
Please.
we don't really need to revisit the stormwater because it sounds like it's subject to board engineer. Figure of it.
Yeah, there will be, some stormwater management measures that will have to be provided. I don't have those details yet, but they agreed to provide those details for our review.
Last couple months, we've been kind of been a little bit more aggressive on that with this plan, right? Because they have the rainfall. We know all the waterfalls in the neighborhood.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Mr. Jeffers, thank you. Mr. Rubin?
Yes, we have 2 operational witnesses.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, is your intent to call them effectively in tandem?
Yes,
okay, so-
Ryan is gonna be the primary speaker and Dina is going to fill in as necessary.
Okay, so
I'm
we
gonna
will,
have them sworn in simultaneously, have them introduce themselves, and we'll take it from there.
we're going to swear them in at the same time, correct? And then folks, one at a time, you'll identify yourself for the record, you'll state your name, you'll spell your last name, and you'll confirm your affiliation with the applicant entity. If you could please both raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
do.
If you could, please, one at a time, state your name, spell your last name, and as I indicated, provide your affiliation with the applicant entity.
Brian Huntoon, Huntoon, Vice President of Plant Operations for Marquee Health Consulting Services.
Ma'am?
Dina Napolitano, Napolitano. So the owner's representative, Marquee Health.
Okay, very good. Mr. Rubin, they're not swearing in any expert capacity. They're lay witnesses, so no need to voir dire. So please proceed, Mr. Rubin.
Thank you. I'm gonna put this right in the middle. Brian, I'm gonna ask again, first of all, I'm gonna ask each of you to affirm and you have been involved with discussions between the owners of this site and the municipality over the last 3 months or so. Is that correct?
Yes, we have.
Yes.
Okay. Ryan, why don't you begin with describing the first of those meetings, how they came about, who was present, and what was discussed?
Sure. Back on March 3rd of 2025, we reached out to, we both kind of reached out together, I believe, the mayor, Chief Dillon, and EMS to try to resolve some operational issues we were having at the center, mostly dealing with 4 major issues. One was the amount of 911 calls and how to reduce that. It was putting a strain on the volunteer ambulance service here in town. Also, better communication as far as emergency call list to share information about who do they reach out to when they need somebody. Also, radio frequency, I guess, has been a long-term problem at this building. So I know the police and the fire company, their walkie-talkies don't work in some part of the building, so they have trouble communicating. They wanted that resolved, request we help them with that. And the last section dealt with when the 911 does report to our center, what doors are they to use? Sometimes they'll go to a door, nobody will be there. So we determined course of action, which I can share some of the conversations we had, but that was the 4 main points, how to improve our relationship with the town. Since then, we've met 3 other times. We face-to-face meeting on March 10th. We also met April 24th, and we are scheduled to meet again on July 30th. I will say honestly, the first meeting was a struggle on both sides. There was definitely some walls we had to break down and get to know each other. Hopefully, and I can speak for our side, but we've made significant strides in strengthening that relationship, reducing 911 calls, evaluating every call that goes through. I don't know how much the board wants to hear details on that, but we are working, evaluating every 911 call. Why was it called? I can give you a quick example. The last reports I have was from March on me, and we had a total of 22 calls in March. 16 of those calls came from our memory care unit. So if you look at a memory care by our health codes, we have to have a phone in every room, including a memory care patient. So 16 of those 22 calls in March actually was a memory care resident trying to call out. So what can we do about this? So what we're trying to do for that one example is work with family members, and if they sign off that their loved one doesn't need a phone in that room, it's an opportunity to reduce that risk of somebody calling 911 on the memory care unit. That's just one example of what we've done. We've identified doors. Now we have 2 doors they go to. We have a staff member waiting for 911 when they get there. The DNRs, which were a problem sometimes that do not resuscitate orders, are available now at the nurse's station. That was a struggle back in March. And the radio frequency is we had evaluation done by a company out of Texas. They did a full report for us, shared those results with Chief Dillon. And we in the process now of firming up a vendor to actually fix the situation, which I would say we're probably 30 days out from actually fixing what we need to do on our side. So EMS, the fire company, and the police can take benefit in our buildings when they need to.
Good job.
Thank you.
No, I would just like to agree with Brian that we did meet with the mayor, Chief Dillon, Darrell D'Amore. It was definitely a struggle at first, and I've actually logged comments from the initial comments after every meeting and sent out notes to the whole team. And the last one, I just want to say that Chief Dillon said that we're making great progress. The communication has been great. Darrell D'Amore said, that things are looking good. No comments at this time. Things look great. Radio frequency, we're very pleased to hear that.
Counsel, can I ask what your client representative is reciting from as she's
My own notes.
Okay, so while the rules of evidence don't strictly apply in this proceeding, Ms. Napolitano, your counsel will advise you. We really can't speak for folks who are not in this room as to what they did or didn't say. So I would, counsel,
Okay.
I would guide your witness on this, but that's my position to the board, is that this really is not fodder for testimony.
Okay, I'm sorry for doing that. I would just strictly like to.
I would like to add to the board members, I'm fairly new to the position with Marquis. Tom Kilcourse was here prior to me. Some of you guys might remember Tom. But ultimately, we want to be good neighbors. We want to do the right thing. Today, I met with one of the neighbors about some trees on our property line that are hanging over that we will handle. So communication is important to us, and we'll continue to focus on complaints with the neighbors. And if it makes sense to take care of it, we will take care of it.
As well as operationally with the plan of action that has been put into place to address all the things like the 911 calls and the entryways and the DNRs and in the nurse's station, the communication, the drills. That was another thing we added, were more mock drills on 911 calls in the facility. So yes, I'd just like you to know that we are doing our best to be good neighbors, proactive. And I'd also like to say that I've been in other healthcare, working for other healthcare industry. I've been with Marquis now for 6 years. The difference between us and some of them are that we buy our properties, we own our properties, we keep our properties. We don't sell them off. We're not looking to just make a dime. We're looking to make a difference in the lives of the people that are there. We're here for the residents of that facility and to be good neighbors.
Councilman Rosolo, I'd like to answer your question about handing over the food on the gate and or keeping the employees from moving out of that area we're going to provide them. So I'm proposing to corporate that we install some outdoor cameras that will not be showing the neighbors' yards, but our property lines, and we would address any issues as they happen immediately and handle it how we need to when we have actions like that happen. That would be my plan, is to add a few exterior cameras to the building.
Thank you, sir. This time, no, go ahead.
I'm just, I know there's the question about the address that you guys had mentioned you'd address.
Yes. So, one of our IT techie people, definitely wasn't me, was able to get it changed on Google, Google Maps, Waze, and Apple.
I just looked at it, it's still Hamilton.
On which one?
Google.
No, the addresses hasn't been changed.
Okay.
It's
The directions
haven't changed.
Oh, the address won't change. I'm
That's the
sorry.
mailing
So,
address.
okay.
That's because it's the mailing address. So when you put your address in that you want to go to, right, you want to go to the Allendale Rehabilitation Center. And then you say, how do I get there? So then the Google algorithms are saying, this is how you get there. Now, the only time we saw it not work was when somebody was actually off Harrington. And it was like,
In the
well, you're right,
neighborhood,
you're
right.
in the neighborhood, well, dummy, you're right there, kind of thing. But otherwise, it is directing you in off of 17.
Now, the address, the actual post office address, do you get mail there?
Because we're on mail, mail comes.
Mail or post office box.
It gets delivered
Okay.
to 85.
But that delivery comes through the 17, doesn't come through the parents' mail.
That's correct.
So the post office knows to deliver mail.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, if I might for a minute,
Please do.
Council, I've done this a number of times in the past year alone. An applicant, a property owner developer can certainly petition the USPS through the Postmaster General to update the physical address of a property, and that is done in concert typically with the municipal first response officials. And the guiding light they typically apply is where is the real access, where and how are we getting there if there's an emergency. We talked about this at prior public hearings. Has there been any petition or at least any even informal interface with USPS to actually update the address for this property to a Route 17 address in lieu of a Harrington address, which is not an access point?
Not that I'm aware of.
Me either, unless, I would have to check on that, I really don't know, but we certainly will do it.
Yeah, for sure. Back in, I believe it was September 30th. Yeah. September 30th, the board requested that address change. And that was the process was supposed to begin at that.
Okay.
Because right now you go there, there's still signs all over the place that say 85 Harris Road, even the one at Route 17 entrance. You go to your website, the website still says it.
Right.
So that should all get changed.
Okay.
Yeah, because some people may put in like 85 Harrington and not downtown
Right.
Senior Living, and
Yeah.
then you're going to 85 Harrington.
Correct, and that might have been my misunderstanding, as I thought it was the way it's getting here and the addresses, because how we'll take care of it, and I'll do it the right way.
Are there other properties operationally that did a similar renovation where it was nursing home and added acuity to it that you guys have experience with? 'Cause I'm trying to understand if this renovation is to drive more people that are sick and skilled nursing, wouldn't the need for more ambulatory services potentially be required versus what it's been historically now that you're kind of improving the services? There's going to be sicker patients there. And we already know what the ambulance traffic is currently. So is it fair to assume that acuity up needs for visits may go up?
I mean, that is not my area of expertise, but I would think you would have a slight tick in higher care acuity, that the calls might go up. But we also have a huge renovation to the independent and assisted living properties too. So those people don't need as much care. It's part of the problem that originally started this whole conversation back in March was our 911 calls were elevated. And one of the reasons where census, when we brought that building, was down significantly. I don't have the numbers in front of me. And we increased census greatly, therefore, for patients to take care of in the building. So to that point, there probably is a need, but it's not my area
It's
to actually
possible that
explain
our
that to
numbers
you.
these numbers are understated relative to what the future needs are of that facility, pro forma for the renovation.
Possible.
Thank you. What are the current operational guidelines for refuge or garbage pickup, and what have they been? Time.
We have, it's not to be before, it is on our notes.
Yep. Not to be before, I think it was.
I think it's not before 8 a.m.
How would you assess your ability to adhere to that?
Yeah, pickup times are 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. now.
Right.
We've worked with our trash broker and our hauler to adhere to make sure they follow those guidelines. Personally, I have not heard of any issues, but if we do hear of issues, also we'll address them as we hear them and hope that trash hauler.
I can assure you that that's not being maintained.
Okay.
And that's not been the case for the last year.
Okay.
That was something, again, that
Recent.
Mr. Rubin, I mean, we run this.
There was testimony by one of the neighbors that on one day, the Tuesday, the garbage people had showed up. That was the only testimony, was one day between the September meeting and the December meeting. The witness pointed to one day. She said Tuesday. They showed up at 6:30 a.m. I have reviewed that tape twice. I can even give you the minute on the tape recording where that.
Counsel, that we heard you. We heard your response.
Please.
No. Counsel. We heard your response. We heard your response. We can move on from that. Okay.
So one day.
So hold on. It's your testimony that the garbage picked up before 8 a.m. once.
No, it wasn't my testimony. It was the testimony of the neighbor.
So what's your testimony?
I don't testify.
What's your client's testimony? What's your client's view on that?
If they are showing up before 8 o'clock, we will address it with the trash roller. If they don't adhere to us, we will replace them with another company that will.
Sir, you said before that you're willing to make amends and whatever their needs are, your neighbors.
Yes.
I think you should reach out to your neighbors because there's definitely some issues.
Yep. And so like I said, I met with one today for the first time. I provided my card. I provided information to the neighborhood. I don't know the best way to do that, but I would love to be engaged with the neighborhood. Again, ultimately, our goal is to be great neighbors. We're going to be here for a
I
while.
know there's some people sitting behind you that do have some issues.
Yep.
So.
And I'll be willing to listen and address them as long as they're reasonable. We can agree. Sometimes they won't be, but most of the times, if anything that we can do to fix the problem, we're going to fix it.
And I think also at the previous meetings, I know that whatever neighbors were here were given cards to call and let us know what happens. I actually got one call one day from one of the people, one of our workers in the facility, and they said, I just want to let you know there was a car over by the gate trying to make a delivery, blah blah blah. I said they took a picture of it and sent it to me, and I said thank you so much. We got on and immediately spoke with Yehuda May over at the facility. He called them and reamed them, and
That
it
was
was
our chemical company, Clean Slate.
okay.
On that date. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is if we are aware and we know what's happening, we can do something about it, and we want to do something about it.
Do you feel like it's the responsibility of the residents to sort of have to babysit the property?
They don't have to babysit the property, but
You know what I mean? Should they have to complain all the time? If you want to be good residents to the neighbors,
right.
Should they have to call you and tell you when you're not following your own rules?
Well, hopefully we shouldn't have complaints, and hopefully those complaints will go down.
Hopefully.
But in the meantime,
well,
we
I
need
think,
to know about them, be able to address them.
and I
There's a lot
think
of
they will.
hopefully
I
here.
know. I think they will go down because we're putting in a fence that is going to block that area, that's an issue. That fence is being, it's already on the electronics for the emergency, so everybody is safe, which is really the most important thing in my eyes. So that's being done. The privacy screening is being there. The buffers are going there. The lighting has been changed. We're giving the employees, they're getting not only instruction and awareness in the facility about where they need to be outside the facility. We're telling them they need to be good neighbors. And it's part of who we are. I mean, we really do want to make it our mission to be that type of people. We would rather go over the fence and say, hi, Mrs. So-and-so, you know what? We're having an ice cream social here today. Why don't you come over? That's the way it should be.
No, I appreciate what I think you should be, but then I appreciate what I witness. And the track record is underwhelming. And so that's what we're making our decision.
Change?
No.
From what?
I live outside the 200 feet on that street. The garbage comes. The traffic is there. And none of the things that we've talked about since the April 24 meeting has really transpired. So for me, your credibility is low in terms of operating the facility to the things that are on this sheet. So you may say it can be done, and these are all the things that we are asking, but my comfort level and you being able to execute on that is low based on what I've seen. That's my opinion.
Are you testifying that you've observed garbage trucks? Are you testifying?
He's not, he's a board member making an
That's fine.
observation, Mr. Rubin, and it's.
When have you seen garbage trucks that have been?
Mr. Rubin, Mr. Rubin, you don't get to cross-examine a board member during a dialogue and cross-examination of your witness, okay? The board member is making a comment about credibility of your witness and what they're implying could and might be
on his
done.
observations, which need to be challenged.
I disagree, Mr. Rubin.
Council, what if we still need to see it for ourselves? And I mean, we need to know what's happening because we're addressing it with the garbage company and they're saying, no, it's not happening at that hour. So why don't we put a camera there? It's an easy fix. We'll put a camera there. If those things are happening, we need to take care of that.
Spaltano, I think, Council, you came before the board the very first time. What, September? October? Ballpark. Last year.
Yes.
September. Okay. And I know that, Mr. Antuna, I believe you weren't, I know you guys, neither one of you. Okay. The gentleman before you, Tom Gilchrist. Okay. Tom Gilchrist. Is he still with the company? He's no longer with the company. Okay. This board sat and provided comments, for lack of a better word, but I asked council to be honest here. And there were, these things were talked about, and nothing's happened. And I think what Sal is saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Well, here it is, almost 9 months later. Okay. And Mr. Rubin, I'm trying not to give a testimony here. I'm just giving facts. Okay. And what I'm hearing and what I've heard over the time is that there really haven't been changes. So now you're coming in, you're asking for something. You're asking for this more intense use of this property. And we're not seeing changes that we were told would be looked into.
Isn't it a less intense use at this point?
I'm hearing.
That's not really a question for a board member, ma'am. I mean, your witness.
I'm saying
I'm
it
just
is
trying
a
to
less
fix that.
intense use.
Okay. I'm sorry.
We're appearing for you for a less intense use, not a more intense use. We're reducing
You're reducing the beds.
overall. Right.
Okay, you're reducing the beds, but the potential of care is changing.
Yes.
Correct.
The number of months.
Okay, thank you.
And I could add, there's a reason why Mr. Kilcourse is no longer with us. I could say that, and, again, I'm new. So hopefully, it'll give you a chance to get some of these items taken care of and addressed in the near future. And as far as the fence goes, I know we need permits and all that has to be approved before we do any of that work. But, that is our intent. That's really all I can say on my behalf is if the board can give me a chance, give me a few months, we've made progress with the mayor and the fire chief and Chief Dillon. I think we can make strides with you guys as well.
Can I ask, I don't mean to interrupt, Mr. Chairman, but we're going back to some of the testimony. Has the applicant made a request of any of the first response officials that they indicate they have spoken to issue a formal memorandum to the land use board regarding their conclusions or opinions? Because otherwise, I don't know, Mr. Rubin, I see your gestures, but candidly, I don't know what we have beyond the parenthetical quotes of your client saying, here's what so-and-so said, here's what the other so-and-so said. You have these meetings, these are over the course of half a year.
You have sworn testimony under oath. That's what you have.
Well, we have a hearsay statement under oath from Ms. Napolitano.
Testimony under oath. That's what you have.
Okay, we'll rely on the record. Thank you.
Please do.
I'm just looking at the ambulatory numbers and calls. Mr. Kilcourse, when he was here, said that there would be possibly an attempt to privatize it. Have you guys looked into that?
Yes.
What's your feeling or take on that? Because just looking at the numbers, you guys are right on track to pretty much almost meet or exceed last year's numbers.
We did a couple of things. Now, I wasn't involved in this directly. Chief Dillon actually reached out to, and again, I'd have to check the notes, an ambulance service that he was aware of that could support. As we reached out to someone as well. To this current day, I don't think there are any new agreements for support in that area. So the focus was, okay, what can we do to focus on getting these numbers down and at least being able to justify, which happens a lot, a true 911 call.
I'm just looking just because from the meeting in December and with the only data I have goes through May 15th and the frequency was 0.82 from January to May 15th, and the frequency last year was 0.88 calls per day. So almost a call a day. You're right on track to kind of meet that again. So I know it is a burden on our first responders because they are volunteers. And so I would like to see an effort to privatize it because the intensity, although the use is not going to increase, the frequency is going to increase based on the patients you're bringing in. So I don't know that I feel comfortable with that not being privatized.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Forgive my ignorance if I'm not saying it in the right manner. I know we've had discussions and we can get them confirmed however we need to with the EMS team, with Darrell D'Amore and Chief Dillon, and talked about if we still needed to look down that route. At this point, they said that's on hold. We're trending in the right direction.
I'm just telling you
the
information I have as a board member for me to be comfortable.
Okay.
We don't have those numbers.
Yeah, I don't have that.
If
So
you had all these conversations with the first responders, with Chief Dillon, it would be prudent to get those numbers so you could in fact see if you needed to look at maybe privatizing the ambulatory service. But for me to sit
on
here,
the communications they're getting from the chief and from Mr. Demore, they're not.
I'm just telling you where I stand.
Chief
Right
Dillon
now,
provides every 911 call to us and we
He
review
does.
every night.
okay. But do you know how many calls there've been since January to now?
I don't have that in front of me. I do not. I have March's call, as I said earlier, 22 in March, 16 were for memory care.
So also when Mr. Kilcourse was here, we also did ask him if he did look into having a 24/7 staffed ambulance there. And he straight out told us it was financially impossible by your company to do that.
24/7 is difficult. It is difficult to do.
It's difficult for
We also, you're right. You're right. But we looked into Life Ride and different ambulance companies that are not equipped to handle certain, they legally have to be handled to, what is it called, Brian?
Chief Dillon, yeah, for emergency services. So the
Emergency
life rides can't handle
So the
it.
life rides can't handle it.
Chief
but they-
Dillon gave us Hackensack.
Hackensack is now,
Jersey, but he reached out to them hoping they would give some support. And
they do.
They were unable.
I think the
So
issue is that we don't want this to fall on the town. This is not a town issue. This is your issue. So we're hoping you'll come to us with a solution.
Sure.
And by saying finance is the problem, that's not the answer. To be honest,
I can't speak for what Tom said.
I understand that, but I'm just reiterating.
I will take that back to the owner.
Okay. I mean, do you guys have any records of the amount of calls? I mean, you know, there was a comment that was just, you know, Frank's throwing numbers here. And you guys should have some level of records of the phone calls that are made for EMS.
We do. We just don't have them with us. Honestly, to be honest with you, I don't know about you, Brian, but I thought that was kind of an issue that's been resolved and resolving. I didn't think that was.
Chief Dillon provided all 911 calls from 2023 and 2024. Every single one. We looked at every single one, categorized it, true emergency, resident calling, dementia unit calling, family member calling, what the calls were. Broke that all down and reported it back to them. They were satisfied with us taking the due diligence to try to figure out what's going on here, what we can eliminate. And from the last meeting, again, we're meeting in July, from the last meeting, they were satisfied in the direction we were headed. Again, that's what we heard from them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's surprising to me that they're saying that when the numbers don't seem to match it. Yeah, you know.
I can't speak for that.
It's just hard to.
Other questions, comments? Give or take on things. Okay, I just want to, John, before I do that, I'd like to have Ed, Michael first. Okay, please.
I was following the questions offered by the board with regard to the emergency service calls. And I think that's an important consideration standpoint of trying not to testify here, but I know that the applicant, correct me if I'm wrong, is you're increasing the number of skilled units by 20 total. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you are increasing the needs for nursing type of units in the overall proposal. You are adjusting the assisted living units by 37. Reducing by 37. So there is the ability to intensify based upon the type of units that you're proposing, and that's one of the variances that this board is hearing. So getting to the bottom line as far as the emergency services, so transportation. Fencing and everything else and parking or ancillary to the whole discussion.
To the whole part of that. Okay. Comments?
Mr. Chairman, please, we have I think that there needs to be some explanations, but
The memory care beds, like, we know that the 911 calls, they're initiated from that memory care unit, and that we've identified the fact that that is where they were coming from. Not all of them, obviously, 16 out of 22. That when we can get, and we hated to say it, but we said the repeat offenders, that we can, meet with the families and see if there's some other alternate means we can give them and provide them with. So I think there will be a decrease in the calls from that. And additionally, there were other calls that were called, what would I,
You're not increasing on the memory care beds, are you?
no,
No.
no. Um,
So if those numbers are reduced, where many of the calls seem to be coming from, that would offset whatever increase come from the still there.
right, and that's not to say that, that's not to say that obviously if there is a significant increase, something needs to be done. I mean, that's just, it has to work. It has to be safe for the people, for everyone. Including the EMS team, they have to be safe, they can't be overworked and, but do we need some more information from the team that we've been talking to for their level of comfort at what this is? Because they are the EMS team. That's the police department. That was the ambulance, the volunteer ambulance services. Those are the people we've been talking to get to a comfort level. So how do I give you what you need to know?
Mr. Palatano, the board, I understand it's sort of a rhetorical question, but the board can't give you advice on how to prosecute your own case. My observation, legally speaking, as counsel to the board, is that boards normally have staff reports in front of them from departments and agencies. The last exhibit introduced by the board was introduced in December of last year, Exhibit B1, and it showed a significant increase in calls to first response under the current ownership of this property. And since that time, there have been no official positions by first response, save for providing objective numbers of calls to date, which I know you indicated in your testimony you likewise have somewhere, but not with you. I would think we'd know those numbers cold by now, but we clearly don't, on your side of the table. I think that would help if we did, but I can't let my board help you prosecute your case at this point. So that question really doesn't have an answer that the other side of the dais can answer, ma'am.
Understood.
So just to go back on safety things again, the radio survey you said you said it was 30 days they're supposed to come back and have that completed?
You have a vendor coming out later this week by Friday.
Okay.
For a proposal. We have one proposal, but it was over. We need to get a second proposal.
Okay.
So they'll be out this week and then we'll make a decision and award that. The owners have already committed to make this happen.
Okay.
So I don't have how long it'll take to get that, except roughly 30 days. So when I have an exact date, I can certainly provide it.
Did have one other question, and it had to do with operations regarding the memory care facility. Is there any way of trying to address the phone calls? I know you're trying to find repeat offenders and deal with those situations. How have other facilities managed this issue if you're having someone with memory care issues, which I understand it's a difficult situation, but if they're the ones getting offending, are there any other mechanisms you can offer this board to reduce those calls?
Yes.
Those unnecessary.
Yes. So, explain it the best I can. When those 911 calls are coming in now, they have a system where the nurses desk also gets notified. The memory care unit, they're immediately in there, and if they know immediately, they cancel the call. So they've been able to kind of, get up in front of it a little bit so that that's not continuing to happen. So that was one of the things. The other thing was the repeat offenders, that they could talk to the family members about getting buttons or something else, something a little bit different for them first, so that we know what's going on. Removing that phone from their room. And then there was a third thing too. I forget what that was.
Those were the two.
Those were the two. Okay.
But still, by having the 911 calls go through still, and having the nurse come in there and the 911 call going to the PD still gonna have to still respond to the buildings, to your facility still.
Honestly, I don't know. I would think so. I would agree
So,
with you.
I mean, they're not just gonna take your word that, no, there's no medical emergency here and say, oh, okay.
Again, I'm not gonna speak
Yeah.
for conversations that
Right,
we had with
I don't
Chief
know.
Dillon. However, there was some conversations on how can we do it. We call quick to
Mhm.
cancel
Right.
911, but again,
That's it.
I'm not gonna go through the details because I don't know the details well enough. But we had that conversation of what can we do once the department receives that 911, but we know it came from memory care.
Right, no, I know that. What I'm just saying is, they're not gonna take anybody's word there to saying it's, oh yeah, I know we reported a medical call, but it's not a medical call. You're not needed anymore.
Yeah, I would.
They're still gonna come there. So,
Okay,
and I
We'll
mean,
get-
in my eyes, it's just an abuse of services, but that's.
Well, of course.
okay.
I have a question. I mean, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's solutions that are being suggested by the applicant that, if they're implemented, will resolve the calls. I mean, until these solutions are implemented, is it that big of a hardship to invoke a private company? If these are gonna be quick solutions that are gonna reduce the call in a short amount of time?
We have to take the back the ownership. That's a legitimate question for sure. So we can take that back to the owners and have that discussion.
Yeah, 5 minutes, please. 5 minutes. Okay, board will take a break for 5 minutes at council's request. Okay. Linda. Pause. Pause it.
I can, for the audio, I
Yeah,
can
just-
shut the audio off.
Just mute us. Just mute.
All right. Okay. All right. We're back live again. Counsel?
Yeah, my client has, based upon the dialogue, colloquy that's gone back between board members and representatives of the owner, they've asked for an opportunity to further discussions with the town, to request that, the chief of police and the head of EMS attend the next meeting, whereby they can talk themselves about progress, or lack of progress that's been made, and their concerns or lack of concerns with respect to the issues that have been raised by the board. At that time, they'll also be able to provide data with respect to garbage collection, as well as data with respect to
Postal address. date.
postal address, to provide whatever formal application or whatever documentation they have with respect to request postal address change. Right. And the 911 breakout. They will provide a 911 breakout.
Okay. Okay. Counsel, Larry.
Yes, sir. That's fine. I mean, we had two new witnesses testify this evening. I cannot see whether there's an audience or not, but I imagine there may be. We need to open it to cross-examination of the public of these two witnesses that testified on operations, Mr. Chairman, before the board considers carrying this matter without further notice to a new public hearing date. And I did make note of all the deliverables that the applicant promised they would undertake between now and their eventual next public hearing.
There's the two witnesses are coming back to testify. Their direct testimony has not been completed. So I don't think it's appropriate to cross-examine them before their direct testimony is completed.
I appreciate what you think, Mr. Rubin, but you've got a public hearing ongoing right now. You've had live testimony this evening from two witnesses, and there might very well be a public audience who absolutely has the right to cross-examine witnesses based upon testimony, sworn testimony offered this evening. There's no certainty a member of the public would be at another public hearing to cross-examine these witnesses. There's no certainty these two witnesses will return. In fact, I believe this is numbers 3 and 4 of operational witnesses on this application to date. So, Mr. Chairman, my recommendation is that
Welcome hearing what they have to say, because when we come back, if there's something else that we need to have accomplished, we would like to do that.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, this is beyond disagreement. This is the standard process. Public is entitled to cross-examine a witness that testified at a proceeding. You've had two witnesses testified at length tonight. Mr. Jeffers was cross-examined and he testified for 5 minutes. You've had these two folks in the hot seat for nearly an hour. There is absolutely no basis to withhold cross-examination from anybody in the public who has questions of them tonight based upon their testimony offered this evening.
Counsel, I have to. Okay. I agree with counsel. Okay, as I had said earlier. But the questioning will only be on, obviously, what these two witnesses spoke about tonight, with the understanding that there may be more to come. Okay?
Okay.
Larry, we good with that then?
Absolutely.
All right, sir. Okay. Before I do that, though, I just want to make sure the board is comfortable. So are there any other questions before I open it up to the public? Okay. Ed and Michael? Okay. Members of the public, you are now, there's an opportunity for you to come up, make comments, and ask questions of the testimony that you just heard from these two witnesses tonight. Please feel free to come up, state your name, address, and ask away. But again, of the information that you heard tonight from these two witnesses on this testimony. Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
Jim Briggs, 244 Nottingham Road, Ramsey.
Okay.
I don't know if it was from the two witnesses, but there was discussion from the table here on previous testimony around garbage pickup and frequency of pickups before 8 o'clock in the morning.
Are these questions or testimony?
This has to be, thank you, counsel. This has to be a question, sir, because there'll be comments later on at the end, but please, as long as it's a question.
I suppose it's public comment. It's disagreement with the statement that was made here regarding the frequency of pickups before 8 o'clock. at previous meetings. I suppose I don't have a question here. I incorporate that.
I'm gonna, Mr. Kelly, is there anything that you want that you have to say to that? Because I'm comfortable with this gentleman coming back at the end.
Yep. No, that's fine. If there's no question for the witness, to now is not the time for public comment on the application. So I think Mr. Briggs is correct in relenting and yielding the podium right now and come back at a later date for commentary under a sworn statement.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else from the public to come up and question or have questions for these witnesses? Okay, seeing none, I bring it back to the board. Questions, comments? Okay, Mr. Rubin, we're talking about you coming back in September. Okay. And Linda, that date would be, are we open right now?
Yes, September 17th is a regular meeting.
Okay, that's a Wednesday night, Mr. Rubin?
Yes. 7 p.m.
7 p.m. Okay. Mr. Rubin, what I'd like to hear is whatever continual from these witnesses and whomever that you're bringing. But I'd like to hear, and I'm just going to be very simple about this. You know, there's been a lot of things that these witnesses and your previous people have said that they would do. I would like to see some evidence, record, whatever the legal comment is, to know that this has been done. Because we're hearing a lot of, I missed that. Brian, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, so I apologize.
Huntoon.
Okay, so again, you're new at the position. Okay. I'm sure you've heard some of the previous testimony, et cetera, et cetera. Alpano, I'm assuming the same thing, but you're new here. This is the first time you're being here. We've had people here before from your organization. I'd like to know that things have been done and evidence thereof. Okay. I would also like to see some, perhaps our professionals or EMS, police, et cetera, be here.
We will certainly request that both Mr. Demore and Chief Dillon come, and if necessary, I'll work through Mr. Cali to see what's supporting that effort.
Okay. Counsel, you're comfortable with that?
And I'd be glad to help Mr. Rubin effectuate that to the extent I can.
Okay. And if I need to assist you, let me know too.
Certainly.
All right. And Andy, I'll also ask you for some assistance in that if necessary, please. Okay. That's really, for now, that's all that I can throw into this thing. And I don't want to speak for everybody here on board, but I think I speak for everybody with their sentiments. Okay.
Yeah, we request that this be carried to September 17th, 7 p.m. We extend all time constraints through the end of September. Linda, I know, sends me something to sign, and I will sign that once again. Or you'll have it now.
And members of the public, this is your notice that this is being carried to September. Okay. So you won't get, or Larry, I'll let you do go ahead.
Yeah, certainly. So for the members of the public that are here this evening, this application is going to continue and perhaps conclude on September 17, 2025, 7 p.m. in this room. You will receive no further public notice from the applicant. There'll be no further periodical publication. This is the notice of that continuation of that hearing. So if you're interested to either ask questions of witnesses that will continue to testify in this case and or offer a public statement, a statement on your own behalf at the conclusion of the case, September 17th will be your time to return to this room at 7 p.m. with no further notice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you in
Thank you.
September.
Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. Representative of the board. We have two more items to go through. We need to be very, very quick. Okay. Ruben.
Folks, we still have a meeting going on.
We got to leave. Yeah. But that's okay. Yeah, we have some more business to attend to, please.
Really? We thought. Like, we're not revolving around ours.
All right. Next on our agenda are two resolutions. The first off is application file 2025-08, resolution 25-20. Veolia Water, New Jersey, 98-101 New Street, Allendale, 2101, Lot 4, preliminary and final site plan approval. Larry, do you want to, we have all the conditions, you want to call them out real fast, or?
Certainly. I just had the resolution up. Give me one moment, Mr. Chairman. I'll pull it up again.
Thank you. Sorry, blindsided me a little bit.
No, I just had it up, but you know, it's like Rodney Dangerfield said, if it wasn't bad luck, it'd be no luck.
There you go.
Okay, so the applicant was before the board, as you know, at the recent public hearing to discuss the improvements to the essentially the utility structure which services the water supply system in the borough. The applicant agreed to all of the conditions that were proposed by the board during the course of the public hearing, and they included as follows, above and beyond the standard, effectively boilerplate conditions. The first of which is they will comply with the terms and recommendations of the Van Cleef Engineering Report of May 12, 2025. The applicant confirmed that the standby generator will have an acoustic dampening enclosure. It will comply with all decibel and air quality requirements set forth by the NJDEP and any federal agency that has jurisdiction. They did concede that they would cycle it for routine maintenance and exercise during weekday business hours, so it would not impact any abutting property owners. When it cycles under emergency power, it is exempt from all of those provisions. So the control on the cycling will be when it's doing maintenance operations. They confirmed they would tender a cut sheet of the generator to Mr. Vreeland's office for his review and approval as to the acoustic conformance. And there are, specific NJDP regulations that apply in Title VII. So Mike will be able to review conformance with that upon review and receipt of the cut sheet. The existing frac tanks that are on the property will be removed once work pursuant to the approval is completed, and the applicant stipulated that they would only return on an interim basis when there's emergency service needs that would necessitate them, and it would be on a limited temporary basis if and when that had to happen. We had discussion about restoration on the site. The applicant agreed they would repair, restore, replace any damage caused to several different areas on the property and around the property, including the paper road, the parking areas, adjacent to the garage, and the access bridge to the property. This would all be post-implementation and subject to board engineering review as effectively an as-built field condition once they are up and running with their site plan improvements implemented out there. The applicant agreed to landscape and include trees, development and coordination and width into the satisfaction of Mr. Vreeland's office. We discussed specifically in the area of the water treatment plant along the right side of the property. And the caveat is that if the locations were deemed to be in a floodway or a Green Acres regulated area, they would be relocated to stay outside of those regulated areas. The last of which was the applicant did agree to pave the paper road in those areas of the property that are occupied and utilized by the applicant. There are areas on the property that are not within the applicant's control, so it was limited to those areas that are within their control. And we identified it as areas in and around the garage and associated areas. Again, this is all subject to field implementation reviews by borough staff.
Thank you. Any questions by the board? Okay, seeing none, could I have a motion to accept the resolution as just detailed by Mr. Kelly?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, do I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Linda?
Vice Chairwoman Bergen,
Yes.
Board Member Rosella,
Yes.
Board Member Gugliaro,
Yes.
Board Member Dallo,
Yes.
Chairman Sirico.
Yes.
Board Member Butler.
Yes.
Okay. Then the last resolution is 25-21, 2025 Hazard Vulnerability Assessment Amended Land Use Element of the Borough of Allendale Master.
And this, Mr. Chairman and board members, is effectively a memorialization of the action of the board's approval of that document following Mr. Snikes' presentation of same at the noticed public hearing of May 12th, 2025.
Okay. Any questions on the resolution? Seeing none, can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
All right, can I have a second, please? Second. Thank you.
Vice Chairwoman Bergen,
Yeah.
Board Member Rosella,
Yes.
Board Member Petrino,
Yes.
Board Member Guglielmo,
Yes.
Councilman. Carla wants to vote on this.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Dallo,
Yes.
Chairman Sarita.
Yes.
Board Member Butler.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Opening up to the public for any comment. Seeing none, I bring it back. I need to announce, we all need to know, we do not have a meeting this week. We do not have a meeting on the 18th. So, you guys get it for you. Okay. Any other business that needs to be discussed? Mr. Chairman, sir?
Will the signed copy of the resolution for tonight's meeting be brought to the for our attorney's attention? Who has that copy? I guess.
Linda would have a copy of
Make
it.
sure he
Signed
gets that
copy
in
here.
very short order because he has 48 hours to submit
To the board attorney,
that with the plan.
I was told to send it to the attorney that you were dealing with.
Okay, Jeff Serenian? Okay, that's better. Thank you.
That's what I was told to do with it.
That's better.
Yeah, Ed, I think earlier tonight, Jeff asked explicitly for it himself. We could certainly copy Ray and probably should, but I think Jeff asked for that document as well.
Yes, he did.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's just.
Okay, and we have that all signed here. So, okay. All right, any other business? And you got anything? No, sir. Okay. All right, motion to end the meeting.
Motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Once again,
Tyler, and
as always,
Mr. Kelly.
thank you.
Good night, folks.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Larry.
being on your vacation.
Anytime.
Yeah,
Thank you.
enjoy.
Thank you.